Welcome to the Creation Today show. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Hovind, and I'm joined by a guest host today. In place of Paul Taylor, I've got Ben Schettler. Thanks for joining me.
Eric, it's an honor to be here. We have an incredible show
It really
today.
is. Phenomenal.
Do you smell that?
No.
Neither do any of our viewers.
No, they don't.
That is the new segment smell. We have a whole new format, all kinds of new segments coming up. Very exciting. We're going to be doing a science experiment.
You're gonna love this.
And we're going to find out who has more hot air, Eric
That's correct.
or Ben.
And I think I know who that is.
And not only that, we're going to be exposing some false things on YouTube.
There are false things on the internet?
Surprisingly, there are a few false things that atheists have said on YouTube. We're going to expose them. Now, Eric, it is time to see who has more hot air, me or you.
Hey, Ben, come on over here. I'm going to need your help on this set. I have got my diaper genie bag here.
Eric, you are going down. You are going down.
I told you, man.
More hot air right here. I'm
No,
just telling you.
don't.
Eric, you're going down.
There we go. All right. We're going to let you. I got my diaper genie bag here. We're going to let you put one breath of your air inside that bag.
One breath of just my air.
Yep. I'm going to have to go buy some more diaper
Here we go.
refill kits. One breath. Not bad. You know what? You do have a lot of hot air.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Okay.
See, try and beat that, Eric. There's our mark right about there.
Whoa.
Okay.
Hey. You're an evangelist. You don't do that, all right?
All right, here we go.
Hold that in for me. I'm going to try.
What do you got, Eric?
Here we go. Ready?
Okay, let's see. Wait a second here. I think you just cheated,
I
Eric.
think I just beat you. I think that's what we call it.
Welcome to Apologia Live, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians live here from our studio in lovely Eastern Canada, where we are bracing for a typhoon of sorts or something. I don't know. We got some exciting weather happening later tonight, but before we get to that, normally we are looking at the claims of Christians via video, but today joining us is a very special guest, Ben Schettler. Ben, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Paul. It really is an honor. I appreciate how thoughtful you are, and I hope that I can give some thoughtful ideas as well. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And just so everyone knows, Ben and I are incredibly ill-prepared for this, which is actually kind of what I wanted. This isn't like a formal debate or something that we've both been plotting gotchas on either side. This is so this is how this has all come about. So I've been listening to a lot of Greg Koukl. I don't know if you know who Greg Koukl is on your site. So Greg and his book Tactics speaks about the moral argument for God a lot. And I've been trying to figure out how to express my thoughts in a way about the moral argument for God in a way with Christians that makes sense, because morality has become in its own way clear to me since leaving Christianity. But it doesn't seem like I'm able to express what I'm thinking in a way that is compatible with the way what they're thinking. And so I was hoping to find people, and thank you on Twitter. I put out on Twitter, are there any Christians out there who think about morality and who are willing to work with me to figure out where either I'm missing something or the other side, maybe I'm not saying things right, or maybe I'm just out to lunch. So you are going to be my iron sharpening iron today, I hope. Does that work?
Well, yeah, no, that's awesome. So I have the same things. Like, I really want to search for truth, and I feel like one of the best ways to search for truth, and you know, people with your personality and my personality, we like to take two ideas and bang them together. And if you bang them really well, the one that breaks is the one that isn't true. And I hope that, you know, I hope that I can have at least some solid things to break apart your untrue thinking. And
if that happens, that's great. If that happens, then we will be rebranding the channel after today, and that's all fine. No problem there. But even if it's just we're modeling how to have a conversation about how people who disagree with things can chat, that's fine too. So not everyone knows who you are. People may have I don't know if you were able to see the intro on your side there. The
It
countdown
didn't
talk?
play. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. So what I played was a bit of a few clips from you on the Creation Today show, your very first Creation Today show. It was your science experiment with Eric with the air in the bag. I don't know if you recall that one.
And that we're talking almost a decade ago now.
Right.
But
So
I enjoyed doing those science experiments with Eric. We had a fun time.
but you played the straight man to his. You were always the butt of the punchline, were you not?
Yeah, I think I was more. Yeah, I was always the straight man. Like I didn't. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I always appreciated that about you, that you had on you're able to be humble but yet animated and entertaining. Like being a straight man, that's actually a little bit harder, I think, than the guy who's throwing the punchline. So.
You're a kind guy, Paul. I'll keep you around, man.
All right. Well, but that, as you say, that's a decade ago. So that's how a lot of people in my community might know you. You have had I happen to just know that a lot of stuff has gone on in your life from conversations with Shannon Q and other things. So bring us up to date. Who is Ben Schettler in 2022?
Yeah, that's funny. There has been a lot of water on the bridge.
Yeah.
So since then, I started an organization called the Center for Truth and Love, which is primarily me hosting events and speaking live across the nation. This year we kind of keep track. So I was in about 20 states. We did about 50 events. And we had about 26,000 people attend those events live to some degree or another.
Wow.
But yeah, it's nothing like your subs. I mean, like your channel has really grown over the years too, over 100,000. Congratulations on that.
Thank you for that.
So a lot of what I do is live speaking. We're also working, the Center for Truth and Love is working to produce digital resource content. So it's like video-based teaching resources for Christians on particular issues, a lot of them being apologetic in nature. And honestly, in the upcoming year, one of the things I wanted to start is a podcast and I'd like to do more stuff online. We do have a television show called Truth and Love that's syndicated on the Christian Television Network through Dish and DirecTV. And thankfully, no one has started a channel criticizing it yet. But we will see. You're welcome to grab some of those.
Although that can boost your ratings.
It's got a different flavor than the Creation Today show. It's a little different there. But yeah, so that show exists as well. So that's just some of what I do. But basically, a Christian apologist, for lack of a better term.
I was going to call you Pastor Ben, but you're not a pastor
No, not really. Some people call me that. It doesn't really bother me. It's a similar role.
Maybe that's why I've heard it. And anyway, so the link to that channel that you're talking about, you do have a video. You had a YouTube channel for that ministry, and that is in the description. So if anyone, when we're done talking, they can go to the description and find that link. It's already there. So and yeah, no, you may well. Maybe you want someone responding to your stuff. Having it's always you have to have a good villain, right, to be a hero. That's how you're judged. Maybe
that's why I'm here today for you, Paul.
Perfect. All right. Well, you're in my rogues gallery now. Perfect. Or I'm in yours. I don't know how that works. Okay. So you are an evangelical Christian. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you think that the moral argument for God, that's one of the arguments you would use. I would think you would put forth and say that that's evidence for God, right?
Yeah, I use that argument often when I'm speaking to live audiences. Just a week or two ago, I gave two arguments for the existence of God. One being like the teleological, I guess some would call the design argument, and then the other was the moral argument in that particular lecture. And I think the moral argument I always say this when it comes to arguments for the existence of God. I think certain arguments are more compelling to certain personalities. So I think the way some people think, and I would say to some regard, I guess there's some value in emotions, but I think with our emotional thinking culture, I think the moral argument may carry a little more weight, and perhaps maybe more than it should, to some degree. But I feel like it's an argument that may have been more of a lot of apologists really like the Kalam or cosmological, but I think the moral argument is extremely compelling. And essentially the way I see it, and that may be helpful too, is the way that I see it is that you see what I would call a standard of morality, this ontological thing called morality. And I think the way my claim would be, the only way to properly understand that in a rational sense would be to say that there's a lawgiver. So there is a moral law, therefore there must be a lawgiver. So a logical rationale to the ontology of morality is that God exists. And I don't know if that's kind of
that you did that well, and you introduced it well, and I'm happy to know that is the page where this conversation is starting. That's great. I'm seeing in the chat they're starting to see a little bit of clicking on audio. Is it when I'm speaking, chat, or is it when Ben is speaking? Let me know. Anyway, we'll see if we can sort that out.
I'm sorry about that. And I did not bring headphones. I have
that's all right.
On computer. Yeah, I'm getting some chatter as well. I'm sorry if that's me.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently it's crackling with both of us. So who knows? We'll both go with blame here. So if I had a dime for every time someone said, "Well, that's that's epistemol," or that's not the ontology, right? That's that you're just describing how you know the ethics. You're not describing what grounds the ethics. So that's why I want to kind of get to today. And I'm wondering if you're willing to work with me on some definitions. So you said, of course, if there is moral ontology that requires God. So let's start with morality. What is morality to you? How would you describe it? Are we talking about the same thing when we talk about morality?
Yeah, so I had this question, which may give some clarity. And I would say, Paul, do you believe morality as an ontological ideology exists in the universe?
Not in the sense you mean. So I don't believe that there is I don't think that morality is an entity that exists without beings. And that or that needs any kind of explanation at all. But can we get on the same page about? So when I say morality, I mean a set of systems. Sorry, I think morality is roughly a way of evaluating actions or thoughts against the well-being and or reduction of harm of other beings. So when I say morality, that's roughly what I mean. A way to evaluate whether we're hurting others or helping them prosper. So, but I'm guessing that's not what you mean when you say morality.
Right. And I think, man, honestly, I'm like, man, conversation over here in some regards. And I don't mean like, but I feel like the definitions here are the key. So what I argue is that there is some ontological thing that exists out there that is called morality. And you would say that morality is kind of like an evaluation tool. And I would not agree with that. I believe morality is a fixed essence of a thing. And
but can you define it? Can you define what your version of morality is?
Morality is yeah, that's a good question. What is morality? Because I would not say it's the process of identify. I would say morality is, I'm sorry, I didn't think I was going to have to define the word, but it makes sense.
No,
so give me a
but
second.
but well, and part of the I think part of the disconnect is that a lot of people, just when they have these conversations, they think instinctively that we're talking about the same thing when we use that word, and I think that's how people like Greg Koukl and others end up being successful in playing on people's intuitions, but we're not intuiting the same thing. It's a bit of a conflation, and that's why. So is it fair to say
I've got a
to you that
definition.
do it
A universally fixed point of right and wrong.
okay
So morality is a universally fixed point of right and wrong.
So can you guess what my follow-up question is?
Go ahead. No, I can't.
Can you define what right and wrong are?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Right and wrong is what God reveals through his holiness, specifically in the Bible and generally through creation.
Okay. So right and wrong are revelation, are things revealed by God. That's that would be your definition.
Yeah, morality is a fixed point of right and wrong.
Yeah.
And then how do we know what morality is? What God has revealed to us.
Cool. So, and then you said that obviously that fixed point requires an explanation, and that's fair. And that explanation would be God, right? Now, can you see how definitionally you've begged the question there? Because the definition you gave of right and wrong includes God.
That's what.
So therefore,
I'm not saying morality includes God. I'm saying it's a fixed point of right and wrong. You asked, how do I know?
right? But no, but it's a fixed point. But but your definition of right and wrong are in the definition of morality. Like they have to be part of it, right?
No. I would say morality is a fixed point of right and wrong. What do I think right and wrong is, and what you think right and wrong is, could be different. But I would say we could still agree that morality exists as a fixed point of right and wrong. How I define right and wrong and how you define right and wrong could still be different, even if we agree that it's a fixed point of right and wrong.
Gotcha. Okay. Fair enough. Now,
because here's the thing, is the way you come to morality, to me, has to be different than morality itself. And that's where I'm separating the two. Is I'm saying, you and I both agree that it's wrong to murder innocent people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would you agree with the statement? It's immoral to murder innocent people. Would you agree with that statement?
Under my own definitions of those words, yes. So I'm just going to reserve the right to maybe we don't.
I'm not trying to trick you.
No. I understand. You're not. But I think we would both agree that like there's definitely in any moral system, no matter how you overlap, no matter what you do, you can probably find some way to overlap your morals with to find a point of overlap. Like you and I would probably find a point of overlap in Hitler's morals, right? Like he probably honored his father and mother, as I understand it.
Yeah, we're just on two different pages as to what morality is.
Sure. But I'm trying to get to your page.
I feel like I feel like the way you're approaching morality is that morality is some type of system to determine what is right and wrong. And I believe morality is a fixed point, and we're all trying to determine what the fixed point is. And I think that really is, I think that's the foundational difference. I feel like we discovered it very early on.
Cool.
Because, well, and let me give you an example. So would you agree so you agree with the statement, it's immoral to kill, like an innocent person? You would agree with that if you can define.
Well, sure. No, I mean, so normally murder would be defined, even when I was a Christian, as unjustified killing, right? I think that's probably fair. So yeah, I think unjustified killing is immoral. If that's
and so what I'm saying is that we have both discovered a fixed point of right and wrong. And it is not our agreement that creates the point, but rather we have discovered what already ontologically exists in the universe. That it is universally true that it is wrong to kill. And I guess
No. It's not, it's not universally. It's you and I, because you and I both. So
what I'm
agree
saying is that's what we have discovered. This is where I feel like the difference is fundamental. Is you're saying no point exists like that, and what I'm saying is no. We've discovered when you agree and I agree, and almost every person in the world agrees that it's wrong to take an innocent life. That what we're doing there is not just randomly agreeing together, that we have all discovered a fixed point of reality regarding right and wrong.
So, but the trouble is, it's not a fixed point in that you already agreed that you and I define good and bad differently. And so how is that the same fixed point? You and I are not coming from the same fixed point. We are both just coming from a fixed. I have a fixed point and you have a fixed point. That they are not the same fixed point if we can't agree on what good and bad means.
We both agree murder is wrong.
But that's just merely that's an overlap in our fixed points. That doesn't solve morality. That just tells us that you and I have an overlapping point.
Well, I guess the thing is every person in the history of the world would agree with the statement, killing an innocent person is wrong, assuming that their intellectual faculties are operating correctly. And so my point is when that many people discover the same thing, that's evidence of a fixed point. That would be my argument.
So, okay, but I gave you my definition of morality earlier.
Right.
And that was to evaluate things that are going to reduce suffering and increase well-being. That, I think that is the point that we tend to land on because it is biologically necessary that we do so. Any creature that doesn't value the well-being of the group and reduction of harm of the group is not going to be part of the group and is therefore, as a social species member, not going to survive. Therefore, their genes won't get passed on. So what gets passed along is the genes of those who care about those things. But I don't think that's a fixed point. That's just a pragmatic method, a pragmatic necessity of survival. And so things that have arbitrarily chosen something else don't survive, and things that have arbitrarily chosen this goal do survive. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what I feel like you're saying to some degree is that even if a fixed point of morality does not exist, a perception of a fixed point.
Yes.
Exists. A perception.
That is exactly right. I think people who have not thought it through very well hear, oh, yeah, murder is wrong, because they have their own internal idea of what's wrong that may or may not match what the person who put forth the proposition says. Like, so when you say it's wrong, you mean it's against God. When I say it's wrong, I mean, oh, it's counter to flourishing. But because you are allowing this conflation of the word definition to be different, you're coming around and saying, well, look, Paul, we agree, when really that's just coincidental that we agree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, here's what I think is, I think really the argument should boil down to is that question: is there a fixed point of morality? Is morality a fixed point, or and here's what's interesting is it appears to be a fixed point, even if it's not. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think that is the problem, is that for people who haven't thought it through, it appears to be a fixed point, yes.
Right. So here's the argument that I would make is because it appears it is. Like it didn't appear there accidentally because it's like, we could argue that we're not actually having this conversation right now. This is a computer simulation.
Sure.
But the argument that we would make for it is like, look, no, you're watching this. It appears to be real. Therefore, it's real. So we use that argument on a lot of things. So I don't find it to be a weak argument.
But the opposite. But there's lots of things that have appeared to be a certain way that we've decided that it's not, right? So it appears that the Earth is flat, and it appears that light is white, and there's lots of things that appear one way, but on study and introspection, that's actually not the way they are. Like you would concede that, right? Not everything is at its base appearance.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know if the way we're using appearance in those is that analogous though, because we're using the appearance in terms of the existence of the thing, not the perspective of the thing. So if but sure.
Go carry on with that thought. I want to.
Like, so this is the problem. So let me give you the other side to what I feel is problematic with your perspective, if you don't mind.
Please.
Let me tell you what's wrong.
No, that's why I'm here. I could do a stream by myself to tell me I'm right.
So on one hand, if you're saying there is no fixed point, Ben, morality is not a fixed point. We think it is,
no.
But it is not. Mm-hmm. It is not a fixed point. Then that means that morality as an ontological ideology does not exist. Morality is just a way, it's just a perception. It is not something that exists. And if that is true, then that means that raping someone is not an act of evil. We just think it is. And I feel like that is a very problematic ideology for the average person to accept, even if it's true. Wouldn't you agree?
So that would depend on that depends on your definition of evil. Like, so it's incredibly easy for me to say that because morality is generally being concerned about the well-being and flourishing of people, it's very easy for me to say that rape is wrong or evil. But I've subjectively chosen those goals, and I think you would agree.
But it's not
there are many people out there.
But you can't. You can't say it's ontologically.
No, I can't. But what have I gained to say that it's ontologically?
Say what?
What have we gained by saying that it's ontologically one way or the other? Other than pragmatically wrong, right or wrong?
Let me. I was going to ask you. I believe in morality in the same way I believe that a football team can win a game. And let me explain what I mean by that. So when you start the game, you have two opposing teams and two opposing fan groups that hope that their team is going to be the winner. And at the end of the game, especially if you're talking about American football because of the way they play it, there really aren't any ties. At the end of the game, one team will be victorious, and that is an ontological reality. That's the way I view morality. I view it the same way that I do a team won. The way I believe that you're defining morality is that there is no winners, that there is no existence of evil. We just think there is. And in such a case, it's just everybody's perspective. So we cannot ontologically say rape is wrong, whereas the Christian worldview can. And this is the massive problem of, in my opinion. Sorry, I don't want to get too bad.
No. I'm taking this on board.
This is a huge problem with the worldview, or I know people hate to say the worldview of atheism, but the perspective or point of reference that atheism brings to the idea of evil cannot ontologically say that rape is wrong, even though they can say we believe people should come to that conclusion. But they can't say that it's ontologically wrong, where the Christian worldview can, and I feel like that's a superior position.
Cool. Now, do you think I think I've taken all that aboard, and I hope I will demonstrate that in a minute. Do you think that survival is a method of scorekeeping? That's an objective way to keep score, right? Because that's outside of the bodies. Someone outside of humanity can tell whether humanity's surviving or not. Is that an ontological way to keep score?
Right, but the problem with keeping score in terms of survival is what Darwin himself raised, and that is the reality could actually be in conflict with survival, and then the species would have to adopt a false view of reality to survive.
Oh no, I totally get that. Totally get that. I was just mainly I wanted to see if you felt like that there is that survivability is at least an ontology. It's at least a way of keeping score that isn't subjective, right?
Yeah. Survive. In other words, like the end purpose of man is to survive, and that could certainly be a way in which you view the world. Certainly.
Sure. Okay. So that's not a subjective way to keep score. That's an ontological way to.
It could be objective. Certainly.
Cool. Okay. Cool. Given that, given that goal, are there objectively better ways to survive than other ways? Is it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. So now, as a social species, we we disagree on how many thousands of years these are. That's not the point of today's show. That over however many thousands of years we've been around, that those who have better followed the survival strategy have lived, and those who have not been as good, their lineage has lived, and that those who are not as good at surviving, for whatever reason, their lineages have not lived. That's probably makes sense, right?
Yeah, would agree with that.
So is that not a way of ontologically grounding what I'm saying? Ontologically grounding is just a method of deciding what is creating flourishing and what is counter to flourishing?
Yes. I believe that if your objective is I'm sorry, I thought that was your conclusion. Keep going. Sorry.
Well, I lost my train of thought. So carry with which we're going, and I'll try and remember. No, I'll remember what I was going to say. If you go ahead.
Oh, I feel so bad because I thought that was your point. Sorry, I thought that was where you were going. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, so we have come to the. You are at least conceding that this morality definition that I'm putting forth has grounding outside of the subjects.
Yeah,
because survivability is a fixed point.
Paul, I heavily agree that if the objective of man is survival, then you could actually base morality, like the goal of morality is morality then becomes a tool of survival. Yes, that is one explanation of why we think rape is evil, as it were, or especially murder. I think murder would be a great one. I absolutely would agree that one reason that a person could think that murder is evil is because of our own survival. I would agree with that. Did you have anything to add to that, though?
No, I guess my follow-up question there is, what is deficient in that view, in your view? What is deficient about that grounding?
So glad you asked. Yeah. So here's what's deficient, and I think it does, and this is one of the things about evidence that is challenging. So the atheist says, I want definitive evidence that's convincing to me. And I respect that because as an apologist, I want to provide that. But to some degree, at some point, only so much evidence can be produced. And here's what I would say is the problem with rape specifically is I believe everyone knows it's wrong, in my opinion. I don't think it is a result of a tool by which that the species more survives. I think in our gut we know that ontologically this goes against the way the universe is, And the way I would say it is, it goes against the way the universe is made, because you can make the argument that rape better perpetuates the species. If we go around raping people,
it's true for ducks. Absolutely. But ducks are not a social species.
I'm not okay with that, Paul. That's where it's deficient. I believe raping someone is awful, and it is morally wrong in every possible condition, because there is a standard which God created. And let me get through it. I know you disagree with this, but I'm just saying this is why I think it's wrong. Because there is a standard which God created in the heart of man, and he wrote man's law on his heart. And it's why we cringe in every person, in every scenario, just about in the history of the world and in the existence of the world, cringes when they know a person is being raped. And I do not believe that is a result of, and I can't offer any more evidence other than just saying this gut feeling exists in every person, and I believe it points to an ontological, but I can't offer any more evidence than that, I guess I would say.
Okay. Is it conceivable to you that the reason why we feel these things viscerally is because of a shortcut, like is a heuristic, right? It's basically we've known it so long that it's one of those things that's subconscious. It's kind of like when I write my name, I don't no longer think about it, but when I was a kid, I did think about it. It's just become one of those things that is so automatic now because we've evolved that way, that's why it appears to be so visceral and so subconscious, is because it's just so that one's so obvious. And when we wrestle with morality of other things, it's because it's less obvious. Like, I don't know if that made any sense. Is that
no, it makes sense.
Does that hold?
No, it makes sense. And I'm not going to. There's a part of me that because of where I'm like, yeah, Paul, that makes sense. But given the grand scheme of things, what you then have to say is that morality, we go back to morality then really isn't a thing, it's a perception. And so we have to believe that it's wrong to rape so we can survive. However, it really isn't like ontologically wrong. But Paul, you cringe at it. You like, this is one thing that I would say we find common ground, because I think there's some Christians that would be like, well, atheists don't think rape is wrong. That's foolishness. Okay. But I do know, I mean, that there's Christians that say stupid stuff like that. I'm not one.
Sure. And there's atheists that say stupid stuff. We'll cop to that for sure.
But my point is Paul, you in your heart cringe when you have to think about rape, as I do, as we both do. We common ground there. But the difference is I'm saying, dude, that's objectively wrong. And you're saying, well, that cringe point it's not really wrong per se, but it's just because I've been conditioned to do that. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm totally comfortable. I'm 100% comfortable with that. Like, and that's where the disconnect, I guess, is.
That doesn't bother you.
No, and I guess that was my question coming around to you. That what you ultimately your problem with my morality stance or my morality way of thinking about this is that it doesn't create enough emotion, or it doesn't give you enough self-satisfaction, or is it like that you want the God to be the ultimate tiebreaker, or like I don't know what.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is there is a winner when it comes to morality. There is a fixed point of right and wrong. And I really do reject the worldview. And I'm not saying atheism is a worldview, but I'm saying this is a worldview issue. I reject. Oh,
absolutely. I'm with you.
There is no winner when it comes to morality. There just is everyone's perception. And I categorically reject that position, because I feel like rape is wrong. Like, it is wrong. It's not that we think it's wrong. That it is objectively wrong. And
you can't demonstrate.
And I don't want to look down on you, Paul. Like, that's not my goal. But I do feel like that position is morally superior. I actually do think that position is morally superior to say it's a fixed point, not just an opinion.
So you think that your certainty about something makes it more true?
Not my certainty about it, but the reality of it. Does that make sense? So whether or not I accept that premise, I'm saying my certainty does not make it so. But I'm saying the reality of that premise seems to be more analogous with the world we see than what you're concluding.
Okay.
And maybe,
but you can't demonstrate, like you've admitted, that's not something you can demonstrate. You can't demonstrate that it actually exists. You just you seem to prefer a world where you can rest easy at night that morality is somehow objective. You feel differently because
I
the
guess
only
what I
difference
would say
between
is
it.
everyone prefers that world, even you.
Well, I don't know that that's true. I prefer a world where everyone, I prefer a world where everyone values flourishing and reduction of harm. Because honestly, like there's areas that you and I, we're not going to talk about them today, but there's certain bits of morality that you and I disagree with violently. And I feel like if you merely valued well-being and lack of suffering over those things, that you would agree with me more than you are agree with an interpretation of scripture. And that's part of my trouble is that, if you're just saying, well, what's right and wrong is what God commands, God hasn't been sufficiently clear about what he commands because even people who label themselves Christians disagree so much on these points. God, I think you would agree that people, whether it's through sin or whatever, at least evaluate God's commands differently. So I actually feel like our world would be in a better place.
Not the
Go ahead.
basic ones, and I feel like that's a piece of the evidence. So one thing that I would agree with to some degree is obviously we come to different conclusions about the way morality should be applied, assuming it's a fixed, and morality is relative in the sense that morality is not relative, but the way that we apply truth is relative. Even the Christian would agree with that. So I don't believe in moral relativism, but I do believe in relativistic application of morality. And I think that's an important distinction. So I believe in some cases, and you may not agree with this, but just for sake of illustration, I believe it's okay to take the life of an individual that's in the middle of a mass murder, let's say a situation where they're gunning people down. And the only way to stop them immediately is to take their life. In my opinion, now there would be some Christians that argue, no, you just have to let them kill people because it's wrong to take life in every scenario. I would not agree with that. But then you would say, but then that means morality is relative. No, I would say the application of morality is relative, but there still is a fixed point where human life has value, in my worldview, that there still is a fixed point where human life has value. But the way that we apply that is different because if one person is taking a bunch of lives because I value life, I'm going to stop that. However, I still feel that there is a fixed point. So I don't know if that's part of this conversation, but I feel like that position in Christianity does get misinterpreted sometimes when it comes to moral relativism. I believe that there is relativism in the way that we apply morality. However, morality is still a fixed point. I don't know if that's part of this conversation. If that's a rabbit trail, I apologize.
No, that's fine. I'm happy for you to you let me say my piece. So I wanted to make sure that I want you to be on record however you are most comfortable.
This is your show. Say whatever you want.
No, I get it.
Please make yourself feel at home, Paul.
Yeah, appreciate. So I'm still trying to figure out where. So you think morality is a fixed point, but that fixed point is ultimately based on God. Do you not see that you've affixed a point, but you still subjectively fix that point to God? Like in if God is still the subject, it's still subjective, and the objectiveness comes after you've selected the subject. Is that?
Well,
am I wrong about that?
no. I mean, I would say it can be objective because there's a God. So, assuming the premise that God exists, wouldn't you agree? If God does exist, and we're the Christian God, which I know you have a pretty solid definition of what I mean by God.
Mm-hmm.
If that God exists, then morality can exist as an objective point. Would you agree with that? I'm not saying you have to concede that he exists. I'm saying in a world where there is a Christian God who's all-powerful, all-knowing, he can fix morality at a point based on his character.
Well,
assuming
again, but also then assuming your definition of morality, like assuming if morality is alignment with the will of God, like
right.
if that's what morality
but I
is.
would say it's still circular reasoning to say, well, God. Well, you could argue it's still circular reasoning to say, well, God exists because morality exists, and morality exists because God exists. I think that would be your point, right?
That would be my point. But no, like, so if God exists, then there is such a thing as there is absolutely an objective thing about whether we're adhering to his will or not. So I would go that far.
Yeah. The question is, does he exist? And I guess you can say, though, if without identifying God, you can identify a fixed point of morality, then that would almost conclusively have to indicate that God in some form does exist. Would you agree with that? In other words, if I could say, hey, Paul, I have identified fixed point morality, not opinion-based, but fixed point morality, would you then say, well, Ben, I would have to agree that a God does exist if I could identify it?
So not necessarily, because I think you agreed that I have fixed point morality based on survival. No, I don't have fixed point morality based on survival. That's an objective. You agreed that it was objective.
You have an opinion of morality, but it is not a fixed point.
But if you agreed that survival is a point outside of my control and outside of my, I'm just trying to understand. I'm not trying to combat.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't agree. I would agree that if the goal of humanity is survival, then you could use morality to that end. But it doesn't make morality a fixed point. In fact, as the needs of man's survival changes, so does morality.
But so you see how this is all so intrinsically tied to your definition of morality, because in order for me to say that a fixed point morality requires a God, I have to then accept the definition that morality is tied to God. Like, right? That I have to say, I have to agree that morality.
No, you would no. What I'm saying. Oh man, I feel bad for everybody listening because that crackling noise is obnoxious. I hope it's not bothering.
And I suspect that it is probably my microphone, but there's not much I can do about it today, so I'm really sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. I just feel bad.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, the screen is not my favorite. Like, I would love to have this conversation in person with you, like I don't know, like not to denigrate the platform at all, don't get me wrong, I'm glad.
Oh yeah no, but and maybe you and I end up in Florida somewhere at the same place at the same time. I mean, that would be great.
Well, if you make it to the United States, like at least I can travel as well. I know we talked a while back about meeting up when you had your event in Dallas, but okay, I don't want to get too sidetracked here because let's not get too. Yep. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is I believe. Well, let me go a different thing and then we can circle back. That brings something up different. Is I do believe that morality is a fixed point. And I think that is what is meant objectively by anybody using the term. I realize that you aren't using that term that way, but I believe when any philosopher or any person, when they use the term morality, they're thinking in terms of some fixed point of good and evil. I would say everybody uses the term that way. Let's stop there. And I feel like you changed the definition, because if there is a fixed point, it really hurts your position.
Well, that is possible. That is possible. But what I found is that it's because people don't. I came to that conclusion when I started thinking about it more deeply. And I feel like the deciding that it is fixed in some way is the shallow position, not the deeper position. I understand.
But I would say that saying that it is fixed is literally, or saying that it is not fixed is saying that it doesn't exist. Why aren't you comfortable with just saying morality doesn't exist? We just have opinions of right and wrong. Are you comfortable with that?
No, this is why because this is why I want people to introspectively define morality, and that's why I opened the show that way. Because if I think people instinctively understand that morality actually is about harming people and doing well by people, as opposed to what you actually said, which is like adhering to the will of God. I feel like if you push on people, they're gonna come to a definition closer to mine than to yours.
Define morality for me, Paul.
Morality is evaluation of actions and thoughts as it pertains to reducing harm and increasing flourishing of the group.
What is harm?
Harm would be things that are counter to survival and general happiness. And yeah, that would be harm. Like obviously,
is it harmful
it can
to
be
exercise.
There is short-term harm, and there is long-term. But there are long-term survivability benefits to exercise. So I totally understand that morality. It depends on how big a net you cast and how big a time period you're willing to look at it. But I think that actually reflects reality. That people who have a bigger tent of who they include as their neighbor, and the longer term, they actually come to a more moral decision than the person who's like, well, the most moral thing is for me and my family to survive, so I'm going to cause harm. Anyway, I derailed that, and I didn't answer your question. Is exercise immoral? I think was the question, or does it cause harm? Exercise absolutely causes short-term harm, but long-term benefit.
Well, the point I was going to make then is, in the short term, exercise harms happiness, because you used happiness as a measure of flourishing.
One of them.
Because I can tell you, sometimes when I exercise, I'm not happy. Ironically.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. And that I was actually going to jump in with my own example, like giving a kid medicine that they don't like to take. Obviously, right? Like is a moral thing to do, even though you're causing them short-term unhappiness. But that's why well-being is a better measure than happiness. But when you're talking about harm, I maybe shouldn't have included happiness in there, but I feel like harm is incomplete without at least some measure of saying, when all things are equal, happiness is something to be preferred over unhappiness. But that's a subtle nuance.
So even in your definition of morality, I would say you recognize something that I think is universally true.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say whether it is theft, and you look at the last 6 commandments,
Mm-hmm.
I think universally almost everyone agrees that all 6 of those are morally productive. So at the very least, I think you would have to say that the Bible accidentally, like Moses accidentally, even if you don't believe that God wrote it, that he was onto something there in those last six. I mean,
Yeah, the one that has me pausing perhaps is coveting. I'm not completely sure what coveting. I'm not completely sure about the father and mother, but let's just go with it as general rules. Um, and
yeah, and
but
and I mean,
that's easily
obviously, I
explained by
think
saying, well, those are the rules that have worked well. Like
yeah, it's
that
interesting. It's interesting that Moses identified those. Even if you take the position that God did not write the Bible, those were some significant identifications from Moses. And let's throw those two out. So let's take the other four: adultery,
sure.
theft, murder, and deceit, lying. So the other
Yeah.
four are nearly universally accepted, and I would argue universally accepted. C.S. Lewis makes this argument, and I think it's a sound one. Let's take something like theft. We all think theft is wrong, and you say, no, no, no. I feel like there could be some instances where we don't think it's wrong, and his argument is, yeah, we make exceptions unless it's happening to us. The moment these crimes occur to us, we're like, wait a second, that's wrong. And what I would say is that understanding of wrong is not an appeal. Like our human gut is not going like, oh, you know what? That's really how we survive. Our gut is saying there is something to the universe and the way it was constructed that makes this behavior categorically evil beyond the survival of humankind. And I think this is what I would argue. I think every person knows that. And I would say, and the Bible would make this argument, is that those that are saying, oh, well, one way of explaining it is survival. In some ways, survival can't explain some scenarios of murder, because if hypothetically the human race gets so large that it is weighing down the earth, then it would be a good thing to eliminate a significant portion of the human race so that the rest can survive. And that to me becomes incredibly problematic. On the other hand, if the human race is getting so small it's about to go extinct, I think you'd have to advocate for rape. Whether you're having sex with guys, whether people have to have sex whether they want to or not, so we can perpetuate it. And I would say these things are empirically evil regardless of the threat to the human race. And I find that position to be superior. So that's kind of like a last stab.
So let me can I just rewind this back though?
Yeah,
Like you just said, you just said that. So everyone thinks that theft is wrong, and they can imagine that, but they can imagine scenarios where it might be okay until it happens to them, and then they feel more viscerally.
Right.
And then you immediately after that followed and said, well, then obviously it is a universal truth.
Right.
But I think, but what it becomes obvious there is, no, it's not a universal truth, because we don't value it as much when it's other people. We value it for our own survival. Like, I feel like that completely was an example that was better suited for my view on morality, where you're going to have concentric levels of who you care for and who you include in your tent or your neighbor or your tribe, or however you want to describe that. And we always care about ourselves the most. Like, I feel like that example you just gave kind of undermined this universality of it.
Yeah, no. Because what I'm saying is everybody knows theft is wrong. And you're saying the better, what you're saying is the better explanation of that is survival. And what I'm saying is,
well, the better explanation is that I don't like it when people steal from me. That's the gut instinct. And when I am being empathetic and being a good citizen, I understand that, oh, you don't like to be stolen from either.
But I'm saying it's when you have when someone steals something from you, Paul, your gut reaction is not, oh, you know what, this is going to really limit my survival. What I'm saying is the gut reaction understands that it has more to do with survival. That you're problematic. Like here's the thing. Like here's an example of you're standing on a street corner and you've got a candy bar in your hand, and someone walks by and just takes that candy bar. You will be bothered, and every single person, if they had any connection to, like, if they don't like
Empathy? Empathy? You mean empathy?
Well, look, and I'm having to qualify everything because that's what you have to do in these conversations. But
Yeah, I'm sorry.
obviously, there'd be a scenario where you didn't like the candy bar, so it's kind of irrelevant. But in a scenario where you like the particular candy bar, and someone just walks by and just grabs it out of your hand and continues to walk away. Specifically, you and me are at a socioeconomic place or at an economic place where we can go and buy another candy bar. That theft of the candy bar has nothing to do with our survival. Yet, it would bother us deeply because that's wrong. He took what was mine. And I'm saying that recognition is a recognition, in my opinion, of a fixed point of reality. I guess that's all I can say about it. I really,
Okay.
I mean, to me, I don't know that I can say anything more definitive than that. And I don't know. Convince me that is wrong. I guess let me play what you've been doing to me the whole time. So Paul, convince me that position is wrong. Show me how that's wrong.
I hope I guess for just a second there, I was hoping that you weren't. I think that I was asking in what way is my view deficient, and not asking you to prove. Anyway, maybe I was, and I don't.
Well,
want to
no, you did ask that, and I guess here's how the way, just really briefly I can review. Here's how it would be deficient, because survival then dictates what is right and wrong. So in some scenarios, mass genocide could be right. In other scenarios, rape could be right. And I feel like that's a deficient view. So that's where I would say that's where, if survival is driving this, mass genocide and rape in certain scenarios could be both correct. Would you agree that would make your view deficient? And if not, explain how.
Well, so yeah. So I guess there. I don't. I think you would agree that there have been times where some of those things have been viewed as moral within certain situations.
Genocide?
That genocide has been viewed by some people to be moral.
Has there ever been a time in history where you feel that genocide should have been objectively viewed as immoral, like by the whole of human race, or moral?
Well, that's because they were. Yes, I think it's always been wrong, because my view of history is longer than the people who were looking at it. And I look at Hitler, a situation like Hitler, and it. Sorry, I whatever the rule is about bringing up Hitler, I violated it. But so he had the Germans, at least to some extent, convinced that this was a fine thing to do. But the world in general, who took a larger view, recognized that actually was counter to species survivability. It's the bigger your tent is, I think, the more accurate your moral assessment can be. And so there were, I guess, my worldview, I feel like, explains why both the German soldier who felt it was okay and the rest of the Allied forces who saw that it wasn't, how that there can be people who come up with these different views. I feel like that is fully sufficient. I'm not going to say it's superior. I feel like that is fully sufficient. So I totally get why I'm a Christian.
You don't think that it's possible that through eugenics we could actually progress the human race? You don't think that's possible?
I do think it's possible, and I do think it is possible that given a long enough. The trouble is we don't have perfect information about the future, right? Like, so there's legitimate arguments to be had about what is going to best give flourishing and what's going to best reduce harm.
Could Hitler have been correct in principle but wrong in practice? Because that's what he was trying to do. He's trying to progress the human race by eliminating what he felt was inferior. So I guess what I'm saying is,
sure, like
but wrong in practice.
Yes, I feel like
that seems that, like, That seems like something I wouldn't want to say.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna that'll probably be clipped by somebody, and I'll figure that out. But all I was gonna if your view is long term survivability, again, it's tough to look forward because we just don't don't perfectly know what the ramifications of our actions will be. So it's tough looking forward. It's easier looking backwards to say something was moral or immoral because you can see what the consequences were over a longer period of time. So we've hit our hour.
Yeah.
Did you have any further questions for me that you feel like, something that either you didn't get to say or something that you wanted to ask that you didn't get to?
No, I feel like I hope this was interesting for people to watch. I hope I didn't just bore people.
Well, I was interested, so even if they aren't, but I had a great time.
But no, I honestly, Paul, I can honestly say what I've enjoyed most about this conversation is I really feel like you're making a very strong effort to dig through this and think through this, and I love that. And it's really
awesome.
fun talking to you about that. And I can tell you're more interested in trying to dig through the truth and proving the point. And I can't say that I feel like I'm a person that wants to find truth, but I also feel like I've really tried to drive some points home here, maybe more than others. So I've enjoyed the conversation. I guess my question would be, do you think, I would have one more question in this conversation, and that would be, do you think it's possible that if the goal is survivability, and I would say the goal of man is not survivability, it's to bring glory to God. But let's say the goal is survivability. Like that's our purpose. Could you even make an argument that religion or the Bible is most efficacious, or to use a regular word, most advantageous to that end?
So my viewers are not going to like my answer, so you'll probably be excited. So I would say that historically, religion has been an efficient way to keep populations behaving in ways that the society would want. I feel like that organized religion definitely can help in that goal. The problem that I have, of course, is that doesn't mean that they're true, and so I have conflicted feelings all the time regarding religion, because I do see that there's, in certain systems, in some ways it's atheists will joke it's like that free babysitter for your kid, right? Well, Jesus is watching, so you shouldn't steal the candy bar or steal the snack from the closet, right? So but exactly what you just said is how I kind of see it.
But why would you care if it's true if the end goal is survival? And I guess that's what I'm saying is
that's a super great question.
I guess that's my whole point here is I'm going like, well, who cares then? So if really the end goal is survival, then we can make up anything to get us to survive. But you're interested in the truth, Paul, and so am I. And I think we both in our gut know the truth is rape's wrong in every scenario.
Well, it's wrong under your definition. It's wrong under my definition, but that doesn't mean that we're using. So again, we have not agreed that it's wrong. We've agreed that the way you use the word wrong and the way I use the word wrong have overlap when it comes to rape. Uh-oh. That made you froze.
No, I'm just listening now. Well,
okay.
Here's what I will say, Paul. I feel like you've been very fair, because I do think you could make the argument. Here I am going to articulate what all your listeners are saying, which is, yes, there have been places where the Bible has been abused to manipulate people into being evil. And I would say it, but as a Christian, I do feel like it's unfair to lump religion all together. I'm pretty much an atheist in the sense that I agree that all religions are wrong. The only difference is I think one is right. You know, so
Right.
that's as close as I am to atheism. I know people. So
We just
so
go
don't-
one God
don't
more.
blame
Yeah,
everybody
that's the
else. I
line.
think they're equally wrong. However, I believe, in my opinion, I believe the Bible lived out correctly, understood correctly, is not going to result in you blowing up your neighbor, you causing harm to your neighbor. I believe the Bible lived out correctly should cause you to love your neighbor, but agreed that religion can be abused, and in some scenarios, I'm kind of making the opposite argument here.
Right.
But
Interestingly, like,
yeah.
all I was gonna say was, like, under my definition, the way I view morality, I think the second greatest commandment, like love your neighbor as yourself, is actually sufficient. And I feel like all the things that we intuitively feel are moral is wrapped up in that second command. It's that first one we don't need. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. That's the one that we actually don't need to have the same feelings that you want to feel.
Yeah. Can I respond to that?
Please.
I would say that to love your neighbor as yourself, you have to adequately know what love is. And you cannot know that without God, which is why you need to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's what I would say.
Okay. Well, if we have a follow-up conversation where I fix my microphone, then we will start on that note. I think that would be a good place to start for round 2, if we ever have it. I loved having you on. Unfortunately, to my audience, I saw a couple of super chats go by. I was going to save them for the end, but I forgot to bring up my screen, and so now they're gone, and I'm super sorry. But I will make sure
you can answer them in the comments, right?
I will. That's what I was going to say. I will be sure to go back and find them and answer them in the comments. So look for your answers there. And Ben, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope that this was just a strengthening of our ability to be able to chat going forward.
Can I add one more thing? And I feel
You may.
like in this conversation I had with Apologia, this was the most fair, and like I feel bad ending this conversation because I feel like I did most of the talking and you just kind of let me go. And I'm just like, man, that is incredibly fair treatment of the Christian by an atheist, more than I probably have ever experienced. I'm blown away by this conversation. I'm like, I already had a high respect for you, Paul, but it's gone even higher for whatever that's worth.
Well, for whatever that's worth, and maybe some of my audience will think that that makes me less of a person. We'll see. We'll see. But I do look. This is a place where I want to have Christians and come talk to me. So I will send them your way for references in the future. That's what I will do.
Thanks, Paul.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Later.